Got it. Boom. All right. Nice to see everyone. Thanks for coming this evening for Tuesday school. Yeah, because that's what you all want is more school. Such a great name. Thanks, Travis, for giving us this great name.
That was Sarah's idea.
It was Sarah's idea. Thanks, Sarah, for giving us a great idea. Great.
She is the name master.
All right, I'm going to pray for us, and we're going to start. And looks like we've got a dozen or more people here, and nice to see whoever's on Facebook Live. We're grateful that you decided to join us tonight. Let me pray for a moment. Father, thank you. We are grateful for this group. For some here, it's become a community of faith, doubts, struggling with your word. It's both scripture and Jesus, and trying to understand who you are. And for others, it's just an intellectual exercise, which is great too. We pray that you would continue to move us and help us. We want to see Jesus, and we want to understand this Bible, this library of text that you've given us a little bit better. So help us as we enter into the very end of this class that we've been doing. And be with each one of us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah, so this is the end. It might be this week, it might be next. It's a big class. So I'm not sure. Oh, Dr. Blaze is here. Nice to see you. So this is almost the end of it. We'll see. We're finishing up a class on hermeneutics, on interpretation. That's been going for 30 some odd weeks or so, on how to understand the Bible and apply it to our lives. What is the science, this art of understanding? And we have spent the last 6 or 7 weeks going through genres in scripture, and everyone knows what genres are because everybody here has a Netflix subscription, I'm guessing. If not, you remember at some point going into a Blockbuster and going to the action aisle or the romance aisle or the comedy aisle. That's what we're talking about here, right? Genres. So the Bible has all of those too: romance, action, you name it, it's all in there. Comedy, for sure. There's some great comical sections in there. So that's what we're doing. Specifically, we dealt with law, we dealt with proverb, and narratives, gospels, epistles, some other things. I don't even remember which ones we've done. Law, gospel. Yeah, anyway, a bunch of those things. Today, we are doing prophecy. So this is the exciting one. This is the one you're waiting for. We're going to jump into apocalyptic from here, maybe next week, maybe the week after, or maybe many weeks from now because I need a break. We'll decide that later. But right now, right, Josh, you know about it, taking a break. Time for a sabbatical. Okay. So, but let's talk about prophecy today. And I have a whole bunch of T's that I want to introduce you to. Okay, trouble. Let's see here. Trouble, time, task, triumph. Trouble, time, task, triumph. I don't know. You've got the notes, right? So I work really hard on finding some sort of alliterative way of getting this done. So you can remember this, but let's talk about trouble first. This is kind of the hook. This is the way to bring you in. And what I've been trying to do in the genre section is take us back to the first 25 weeks of the classes and use some of the examples that we used there. So it all kind of connects together. You remember when we mentioned it there in the actual training. Now we're talking about genres and you see how it all comes together. So troubling texts. When we're dealing with prophecy, there's a lot of messiness out there. There's a lot of troubling things. So one that we talked about in here, if you were here at that time, was the Ezekiel and the Isaiah passage. So Isaiah 14, you remember this? Isaiah 14, chapters 12 through 14. Let's see. Isaiah. Yeah, it's a Bible study too. So if you need a Bible, go for it. Isaiah 14, 12 through 14. How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn, you can cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of the sacred mountain. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High, but you are brought down to the grave, to the depths of the pit. All right, so that's one of those texts that we all know what it means when we hear it spoken of. It is in our ancient American mythology. It is generally our understanding of Satan, right? This devil creature who was, if I were to ask you how the devil got its start, you would say something like before time began or early in time, Satan wanted to be high, wanted to be lofty and exalted, and set himself up above God. He was a created being, but he set himself up above God, and God kicked him out of heaven. He was and he grabbed like a third of the angels. He got this revolution. They were all in on it, I guess, and they all got kicked out of heaven. And these are now the demons, right? That's our general understanding of how things happen. And it comes from this verse and another verse in Ezekiel, and maybe connecting it somehow with a verse in Mark that says Jesus saw Satan falling out of heaven, and another verse in Revelation, which deals with the beast and being thrown into the abyss. But none of those verses actually connect to one another, and none of them say what we think they say, and we've created some sort of narrative around it. This is what I mean by troubling texts, right? This text is not about Satan. There's nothing in there about Satan. So we've created a mythology around prophetic texts like Isaiah that give us a narrative that aren't even remotely true. So that's what I mean, okay? And we've done this before. So if this is new to you, I don't know, listen to some cool podcast on Satan. Did I do Satan with you, Josh? Yeah. So you can go back to his phenomenal podcast, which is called, I always call it by its other name, Rethinking Faith.
Rethinking Faith, well done.
I always called it by the Theology Doesn't Suck. Gotta get used to that one. So you can go back there and listen to that on Satan, and you can find out all this information. So this is what I mean by troubling, okay? So some of the texts, the reason that they are troubling is because we don't read them well, right? That's Isaiah. We don't read the text well. Some of them, it's because the New Testament makes some changes. So that causes us problems. What I'm trying to get across is prophecy is really hard because we don't read carefully, right? We don't have a big history narrative of what's going on in Scripture. So when we hear the word prophecy, we think someone said something and they predicted something that's going to happen hundreds of years later. That's our idea. And the reason that we come up with ideas like this are because we've been taught things like, well, here's a prophecy about what's going to happen, or a history of what happened back then. Here's the prophecy in the New Testament, right? You remember the Jeremiah passage that Matthew quotes later on. So Jeremiah 31:15 says, thus says Jehovah, Jeremiah 31, yeah, I've got it right. Thus says Jehovah, a voice is heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping, Rachel weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children because they are not. I feel like we used this recently as an example in here, right? The Ramah question. So this is Jeremiah. This is during the exile. Okay, so this is hundreds of years before Jesus comes on the scene. The man Jesus born to Mary comes on the scene. But Matthew, chapter 2, Matthew, this guy, maybe this tax collector who's writing the gospel, comes along and he quotes this passage. So he says, then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked by the wise men, was exceedingly wroth. Yes, I used King James. Exceedingly wroth. And sent forth and slew all the male children that were in Bethlehem and in all the borders thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he'd exactly learned of the wise men. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken through Jeremiah the prophet, saying, a voice was heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and she would not be comforted because they were not true. Because they were not. Okay, so Jeremiah 31, Matthew 2. Matthew 2 says all this stuff, therefore, or because of is fulfilled. this is fulfilled. This passage is fulfilled at this time. And my arrow is going the wrong way, but you know what I'm trying to do. So it's saying that Jeremiah, the prophecy, the predictor of the future, said hundreds of years earlier, gave this quote, and now Matthew is saying Jesus fulfills this. That's generally how we think about it. Prediction, Nostradamus says John F. Kennedy is going to be killed, and then John F. Kennedy is killed, right? What are some modern day prophecies? Do we have any? Has anything been fulfilled from Nostradamus stuff that we know about?
Ken Ham,
Ken Ham?
is that right?
Well, I don't know. What are you talking about? Like something from some guy in the past has made a prophecy and it's being fulfilled now. Are there anybody who's doing that kind of stuff? I remember Harold Camping from Family Radio made a prophecy that Jesus was going to come back in 1984. You remember that? And then 1989, I think, again. And then I think he gave up.
There's people that say 9/11 was predicted by Nostradamus, but they're like piecing together stuff to say it.
Yep. Right. So this is our understanding. Somebody with a crystal ball, somebody who has some sort of ecstatic utterance, somebody who had mushrooms, I don't know, whatever the case, God spoke to them and they have this new understanding of what's going to happen hundreds of years later. Okay. That's our understanding of prophecy.
I believe a guy named Terrence McKenna would prophesy in 2012, along with the Mayan calendar, that the world was going to end, something along those lines.
Okay.
And so it didn't happen. So yeah, the Mayan calendar ended, but the world didn't. Yeah.
What about all the like Simpsons go back in time to find the stuff that ends up happening later?
You know, a lot of the Simpsons stuff has been doctored though, because I really dug that for a hot second. And then I went back and watched the actual episodes and realized that people were like doctoring the clips and stuff to like make them fit stuff. I was very disappointed because I wanted the Simpsons guy to be a time traveler or something.
It's like people saying there's archaeological evidence in the Bible when there's not. You know?
All right. That's disappointing. So thanks for ruining everything there, Josh. I was hopeful about that too.
If you ruin more, I mean, we can talk about how the future doesn't yet exist to be known. And
Yeah.
therefore, yeah, I put that in the chat, by the way, for, you know, to ruin it for everybody. But
I saw that coming up. Everyone, please ignore anything Josh has to say. That would be fine with me. Yeah, John Cobb, if he mentions John Cobb, if he mentions anything about process, just smile, roll your eyes and move on. That's the best that we can give him. I'm just kidding. When he speaks, you should listen, even though he's wrong about this. All right.
Nice.
Let's keep going. So the reason the prophecy is troubling, this reason we don't like messing with it, honestly, if I asked you what's Zephaniah, Zechariah, Haggai, maybe you know Haggai, especially if you've been around me because I've preached it much times. Zephaniah, Zechariah, you don't have any, do you have any idea what they talk about? Amos, right? I mean, who are these people? We don't read through the Bible, but we have no idea who or what they did. We just know they're prophets. Okay. And the only reason you know that is because one time, a long time ago, you memorized all the books of the Bible because that's what you had to do being a little kid in a evangelical church. So you know that they're actual prophets. That's all. That's about it. Right?
They were never mind.
Go ahead, Josh.
Well, Amos was rebuking the wealthy from the northern kingdom, and and he was prophesying the destruction in 722, which happened. Now there is a lot of corruption, and Israel had fallen away, and so a lot of these prophets were kind of around the same time and in different areas, just waiting for Jerusalem to be depleted, which happened, I believe, in 586. Is that right?
Wow. All right, Josh, be quiet. All right, anyway, nice job. Nice job. So at least somebody knows what Amos is about, or at least a general understanding of it. Good job. I was just trying to make, anecdotal thing that none of us have a clue what's going on, but someone did. So you're into everything. Thanks a lot.
I mean, Haggai told us to give a heart to our road. So there's that.
Some brilliant guy made a sermon about that.
Good job. Yep. I'll be preaching that again in a couple months. All right. So the reasons that prophecy scares us is that we don't read it very carefully, right? That's the Isaiah passage, the Ezekiel passage, these Satan characters. They give us some sort of theology, or we think they're giving us some sort of theology, because the New Testament sometimes grabs hold of the Old Testament and does things that we would never be okay with anyone doing, right? They jump back there and they say, this is a prophecy that came 400 years ago, when we all know that that prophecy had nothing to do with the wise men coming, right? There's just like anyone with a plain understanding of how any kind of text works knows that it was referring to something during the time, and yet here we are, and the New Testament likes to do it, and that just scares us. So we back off, right? All right, Todd and Josh, you guys just go back and forth and have your own little conversation. Just keep those things separate from the rest of us. We don't want to see your stuff.
This is great.
Sometime we just need to have a night where we can just let the 3 or 4 people who really love to talk just go at it, and we'll all just listen. And this, I won't even prepare.
We call that the after party.
The after party, yeah. But by then I'm so exhausted, I don't want to be around you guys anymore. Pedantic little
Truth
theological.
hurts.
All right, so back to what I was saying, right? Trouble because we don't know what text going on. We're not reading carefully, because the New Testament's doing weird things. And finally, because when we read these prophecies, we struggle to figure out how they actually come true. That's a problem too. So if we have this prediction idea and then they're fulfilled, and we don't see a fulfillment thing, or if they do something weird, then it doesn't make sense to us. So for instance, right, Jonah makes a bunch of prophecies about Nineveh. They don't come true. Zerubbabel, I won't talk about that yet because we're going to get into that in detail. Zerubbabel in Haggai, which Sarah knows so well, everything about Haggai, right? It says this: tell Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, that I'll shake the heavens and the earth. I'll overturn royal thrones and shatter the power of the foreign kingdoms. I will overthrow chariots and their drivers, horses and their riders will fall, each by the sword of his brother. On that day, declares the Lord Almighty, I will take you, my servant Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, declares the Lord, and I will make you like my signet ring, for I've chosen you, declares the Lord. This is the call of a king, right? My signet ring. But Zerubbabel never really becomes a king. We have all this prophecy in Haggai of what's going to happen, and it doesn't happen. And there's tons of these passages. And you know what Deuteronomy says, I'm sure, because you've memorized most of the Bible at this point, what Deuteronomy says if things don't come true, right? If prophecies are uttered and they don't come true, you're to take them outside the camp and stone them. Okay, so Jonah should have been stoned, Haggai should be stoned, right? All these people should be stoned, and not the good kind of stone that some of you know about. I'm talking about the being pelted with rocks kind of stone. All right. Actually, I guess they're both kinds of stone. All right. So
Thanks for the clarification.
yeah, I know you were wondering. So what the heck is going on? That's what we were trying to deal with. What's going on in these texts? And what does this have to do with our conversation that we're having today? And how does this lead into apocalyptic literature? Apocalyptic just means like books like Revelation, right? Talking about our future. We recognize that Isaiah was talking about his future, perhaps, but that's not our future. But there are other books, we think at least in our head, like the book of Revelation, that are talking about our future. How does this fit? If they're not fulfilled back then, or if they can do all these weird things back then, and the New Testament, is it possible that whatever's in the New Testament could be interpreted totally different? That's kind of our conversation for next week, or maybe at the end of this week. And I'm just trying to get through this. So maybe instead of thinking about it like this, in the traditional way we understand fulfilled, which is a perfectly good word as long as we nuance it, right? We might want to think more in language like this, right? Types or figures, pictures, things that are in the Old Testament or even in the New Testament that are pointing to something else. They are still fulfilled, but not in the prognostication fulfillment way that we think. Crystal ball, tomorrow you will meet the love of your life. And then it happens, right? We look at our astrological sign that says, you know, good things are going to happen to you. in the next week. Be aware, make sure you buy your lottery ticket, right? That's not what we're talking about here. That's what I want to get into. So in order to really understand prophecy, you have to understand the prophetic genre. You have to understand what's happening. So you need to understand some history. You need to understand who these people are. So that is the time of the prophets. Okay, actually, I'm gonna join here and I'm gonna put another one. Title first. Title. Okay, so this is a boring part, but it'll only take about 3 minutes. Okay, maybe, unless you keep talking. Okay, so I want you to hear. So they're not generally called prophets. Okay, in the Bible, that's not what they're called normally. So there are some words that are often, whenever you see them in the Bible, are referring to a particular kind of person that we might call a prophet. So prophets, right? So let's see. See if I can even do this. No. Prophetes. Okay, so the pro, you know what pro means, right? Before.
Or
Prophetes means carry. Carry. And so they're before carrying or before telling. So it's carrying a message or telling forth a message. Kind of the idea. To announce. Carrying is probably not even the best one. Announce. Okay, so they're before telling. We think about it as foretelling, right? Foretelling, telling the future. No, someone who foretells the future. But really, we should probably think it more like forthtelling. That's helpful for me. I hope it's helpful for you. Instead of foretelling the future, they're forthtelling. These are people who are living during their particular time who understand what Deuteronomy has said. We call this a Deuteronomy, right? The Deuteronomic literature, which might be just Deuteronomy, but also might include Joshua, Judges, Kings, and Samuel, right? The Deuteronomic history. They understand what's going on here, and so they are telling forth those covenantal demands that God has made and bringing them into a new world. That sounded really bad. They are listening to God's covenant. God makes a relationship with people, and he says, if you do this, then this will happen. If you do this, this will happen. And they are seeing the way that covenant, that relationship works in this new land, in this new time here. Okay? The same way that a sermon would do it now. I'm listening to the Bible, and I'm taking that new information, that old information, and I'm saying, here's how this could possibly apply now. Here's how this is helpful to you. Forthtelling. So a lot of preachers would say they have the gift of prophecy. Very different way of understanding prophecy, right? Not predicting the future. I never say that, but there's a sense in which I have a prophetic role. I'm forthtelling, grabbing hold of scripture, and I'm putting it forward. All right, that's the idea there. All right, so here's what they are. They're called ones, or the Navi. I don't need that. Navi. Okay, these are the ones, and you know Nevoim, right? The prophets. There are 3 sections in scripture: Torah, Nevoim, the prophets, and the Ketuvim. Okay, so that's that word, Navi, the ones who are called. These are those special ones. So like this, called, this is Jeremiah 1. If you have the notes, I've put a few verses where these show up in each section. If you just want to have that on your own, you don't have to. But, it says in Jeremiah 1:5, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before you came forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee. I have appointed you a called one, or a prophet, a Navi, to the nations. Okay. Another one is the word seer. Seer. Seer is it's the word real A. No one on here knows Hebrew, right? So we'll just pretend that that's right. It's very close to that. I can't remember what it is. So no one cares. Seer, someone who sees. So it is formerly in Israel. Here's 1 Samuel. Formerly in Israel, when a man went to inquire of God, he said, come, let us go to the seer. For he who is now called a prophet, Navi, was formerly called a seer, Roeh. Okay, so those are two things. One's called a seer, one's called a called one. There's the word watchman. I won't keep writing these, you don't care. Watchman, this is one who is talking about impending doom coming. He's watching to see the things in the world that are changing. He's going to talk about doom. He's going to talk about blessing. So Ezekiel 3, Son of man, I've made thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore, hear the word at my mouth and give them warning for me. Okay, so this is more than titles, right? These are activities that they do. So in order to know what's going on in prophecy, you need to know the people who are prophesying. And then what they're doing is they're called to be watchmen. They're set apart, and they're seers, or there's people who are given visions. Which is another word, right? One who's given visions. There's also the word observer, which is another one who is given visions. And when David rose up in the morning, the word of Yahweh came unto the prophet Gad, David's seer or David's observer, saying, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's that other word, which I can't remember what the Hebrew is. There's man of God, which is someone who is pious, devoted, godly, that kind of a man. 2 Samuel says, he said unto him, behold, now there is in the city a man of God, and he is a man that is held in honor. All that he says comes surely to pass. Now let us go thither. Peradventure, he can tell us concerning our journey whereon we go. Right? So there's a guy in the town who knows anything he says comes about. He's a man of God, pious, devoted, godly. There's a messenger. Someone who's a messenger is Malachim. It's the same word later we're going to get for anyone know that word Malachim? This was your chance to blow us all away with your brilliance. Malachim is the same word for messenger. Messenger in Greek, angelos.
Angel.
Good job. All right.
Right.
So that's this word, Malachim. Yahweh's envoy, representative, somebody who stands between, who gives the answer. He's an ambassador. Haggai 1, then spoke Haggai, Yahweh's messenger, in Yahweh's message unto the people, saying, I am with you, says Jehovah. So then spake Haggai, Jehovah's messenger, or Malachim, the one who's going to bring his message. And we'll talk about that in a second. Servant is the word avad, right? Like Abednego is that first word, avad, right there at the beginning. Abednego is a servant. One with a mission from God, not of his own making. Amos 3, the Lord Jehovah will do nothing except he reveal his secrets unto his servants, the prophets. There's a great book, it's out of print, one of the better books on prophecy called My Servants, the Prophets. So you should grab that if you ever see it in a used bookstore for $1. If you don't want it, give it to me. It's something I would love to have. Okay, so that's the titles. So now we have trouble. We have titles. Let's talk about time, because we got to know what's going on at this time. You can never understand any of these books if you do not understand the history of what they're talking about. If you're not aware that each of these people has their own context that they're speaking into, and it's not your context that they care about. They're speaking into their own context. And I know that when you hear this, it's obvious. You know that that's true, but still somehow when we're reading these things, we take these as if they're prophecies for us. Right? They help us somehow, and that's not what's going on. So I separated this into 3 different sections: pre, monarchy, and post. Okay, so those are the 3 different ones, and then we just give our timeline so that we can understand. Pre-monarchy would be anything before the year. When does the monarchy start? Show me your brilliance. Anybody except for Josh Barshman, because he already gave us his brilliance there. Anybody remember? What's the monarchy? It's an easy number to remember.
1,000.
I give you like 5 numbers. Once you have these numbers, they'll really help you understand.
1000 BC.
Excellent. Okay, so let's just mark this at 1000 BC. It's nice and easy. It's not perfect. Okay, it's like saying that Jesus was born in 0. Okay, probably not. Okay, but it's a good round number for us to understand. here is where we get people like David. Okay, so anything that happens before that, I'm calling pre-monarchy. Pretty simple, right? So 1,000. Then the next major, here, I'll just go ahead and write these numbers in. 922, 722, 586. Okay, and we'll keep going all the way to the cross. All right, so what's happening during each one of these particular locations here? Okay, this is easy, 922, 722. You can remember nines and the sevens, then we're working pretty well. Remember the timeline going backwards? I know that's hard for people who don't live in the Old Testament world like I do. Right? Everything's going the wrong direction. So this is getting closer to today. Right? And then on this side, it's going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. Okay, but
Yeah,
back
the
here,
split of, sorry,
what is it?
the 922 is this split of the northern and the southern kingdom.
That's right. Okay, so this is our whole monarchy period. Now it's over. At least what we call the united monarchy. The monarchy is going to continue all the way here. But it's now going to split into two. So you'll remember David and Solomon, but then we have a split between Jeroboam and Rehoboam. And then each one will keep on going, right? And I should have put those the other way around just for the south and north, but I wasn't thinking about that at the time. All right, so now we have the south. So if we've got our, very familiar thing here, Egypt's down here, the Red Sea is up here, the Gulf of Aqaba, what we call the Red Sea today, which is not the Red Sea of the ancient times. That word doesn't even exist back in Exodus. Please remember that there's no such thing as a Red Sea in the Bible. It doesn't talk about that.
It's the Reed Sea, right?
Nam Suf, Sea of Reeds, the different sea. We don't know where it is. Not that one.
The soup is like red, right? Or
It's reed. Yep, reed, which is close to red. I just want to show everybody here. Watch this. If you take this out, it becomes red.
what?
Okay?
And the
It has no
Bible,
relevance to anything we're talking about. It's not the Red Sea. Okay, so it's the Reed Sea, and it's significant that it's the Reed Sea. If you're doing theology back there, right? That's what's happening. Okay, but that's not what we're talking about right now. But it's important to know that this is the Sea of Reeds. Because remember, Moses is put in the reeds. He put in a Nile full of reeds. The reed thing is, there's a theme going on there. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about. It's all free. Everything else costs. So send your money my way. Okay, so here's this, right? Now we have the split to the north and the south, or what eventually ends up being called Israel and Judah. And I don't mean that they're on this side, mostly. Okay, so when we're reading things in the prophets and you see the word Israel, you need to ask, are they talking about the northern part or are they talking about all of it? That's important. Okay, and you should be able to figure that out just by reading in some context or reading the first page on your NIV study Bible. Right, it'll give you some cool stuff. That's good stuff to read. Never pick up a prophetic book without reading that first page that gives you like authorship, date, political situation, theological themes. Those are usually really good. They're basic, but they're super helpful in understanding what's happening. Okay, so David and Solomon, the whole thing, more or less, there would have been pockets of people who would have disagreed with them and said, not my president. Okay, that would happen way back then too. Okay, but by the time we get here, they're split into these two different places, Jeroboam and Rehoboam. 722, what major thing happens?
All of the northern kingdom.
Okay, northern kingdom falls or gets taken out to Assyria.
Syria.
Right? Assyrian Empire comes in and they conquer Jerusalem. I'm sorry, not Jerusalem. They conquer the north and they remove people from there. Okay? You're gonna have we'll have stories about that in just a second. That's the north exile. Okay, and then 586, yes.
Jerusalem.
That's the fall of they get exiled into Babylon, right?
Right. So this is Jerusalem, exactly. Fall, and they go into Babylon. So that's what's happening there, and then it's going to keep going later and later. This is when the Messiah comes, right? Not this Messiah, but the Messiah that Isaiah says is the Messiah.
Isaiah 9, right?
Cyrus. And they'll go back to the land. So now they're coming back. Or some will come back. And the prophets will be talking about what's going on in each one of these political situations. If you think the Bible doesn't talk about politics, you are missing what the Bible's trying to do. It's all about politics. Everyone's talking about politics from the very beginning to the very end. Okay, that doesn't mean it tells you who you should vote for, but they have an agenda too, just like all of our great presidents and governors and everybody else does. Everyone's got an agenda. So in the pre-monarchical prophets, we have people like Deborah, Moses. Okay? These would be our prophets pre-monarchy. And their job, Abraham, Miriam. Okay? All of these people are called prophets at one time or another. And their job is leadership, consultants. The best way I can probably explain what they're doing. Okay, they're leading a group of people, a large group of people, a small group of people, and it's temporary. They got a job, God calls them, sets them apart. You're a man of God. I want you to do this thing. It's temporary, and then it gets closed down. And there are very few of these. The prophet's not a super big thing back here in pre-monarchy. But it's going to continue. So during the monarchy, this period of time, we have a bunch of other prophets. You probably know some of them. Can you name any? Anybody?
Amos.
Is Amos during the monarchy?
Oh, not the monarchy. Yeah, I'm sorry. You're right. Sorry.
I think we're going to talk about monarchy. Amos, you're right. No, I think you are right. Amos is during the monarchy. Yep. He's talking with kings. Yep. So Amos, Joel, Obadiah. There's that word again. Servant of Ad, Obadiah. And there's the Yah at the end, servant of Yahweh. See, all these names are Hebrew and they have meaning. They connect in certain ways. All right, so those are those, and their job is to hold theocracy in check. So they have a job, and it's talking with kings and making sure kings are doing their job well. Okay. Kings have a very specific job, which we'll talk about in Deuteronomy 17 in a few minutes. We'll get there. Okay, so this is a very formal time period. And there are lots of prophets during this time period that you see. I mean, we've named a few, but you can probably think of more if you stop and think. This is the main time where prophets are going to be around. And their main job is just to hold the kings in check. During the exile, okay, so now we're talking about this time specifically. Some of this time, it's going to be an overlap. Some of this time is going to be part of the monarchy, because some people are exiled, but some people aren't. So during the exile, we've got people like, thank you.
Ezekiel.
Daniel. Yep. Yeah, Ezekiel, Daniel.
Those are the major ones.
Yeah. Yeah, let's put him down here, actually.
Obadiah? Is Obadiah?
Yeah, during the exile. Yeah.
Isaiah, Jeremiah.
Jeremiah's talking during the exile. Yep, absolutely. So these are your prophets of the exile, and their main job is to give hope to the people. You might imagine why they need some hope, right? because they're in exile. They've been kicked out of their land. Imagine if you lost your home and lost your spouse and lost, I don't know, whatever super important to you. Like some of this has probably happened to some of you. What do you need? Do you need people to hold you in check? You need people to rebuke you because you're a big sinner? Right? Probably not the main thing you're needing at that particular time in life. And so God says, I want you to go and tell them it's okay. I still love them. There's stuff that they're going to have to do, but I still love them. Encourage them, give them hope. It's a little bit more informal here, but it's not formal in the sense like of what it is during the monarchy. During the monarchy, prophets would even be paid, right? That's what I mean by formal. Okay, and there might even be a line of prophets. Like I would be a prophet, and there I would train my child to be a prophet. Okay, and he's going to take over for me. Like that's the formality that I'm talking about. It's a position. You might even live in the palace or live near the palace, and when the king calls you, you come, and you give him what he needs to know. Right, Daniel.
I think it holds.
Daniel's in this period of time, but you can see how they're blending together a little bit. It's becoming more and more informal as time goes by. That's what I'm trying to get across.
I think one of the things Pastor Jace or Dr. Jace,
Reverend Dr.
Broadhurst, excuse me, man, sorry, stumbling here. It seems to be like when they're wealthy and doing well, there's prophecies of rebuke. But when they're downtrodden and in exile, it's like, hold on, like, wait up. Yahweh is still in control. Like, you're going to be okay. But it's like it's that flip. And I think like that holds true to us, just to give it like a context for today. Like that kind of, when we have too much, we want to make sure we're like staying humble. We're checking ourselves, or when we're being blessed, I guess, and not forget Yahweh, because it's easy to forget when you're wealthy or I don't know. That's just an example. But
yeah, I think what you're saying makes perfect sense. I had a professor who actually, a lot of these kinds of ideas came from him. Richard Pratt at Reformed Theological Seminary used to say, balance is nothing more he said, on the decks of life, balance is nothing more than momentary synchronicity.
Wow, that's
right.
Good.
So this is really helpful for pastors, especially, but for all of us, that when I stand up in the pulpit, I need to figure out where the decks of life are right now. And if we're all in trouble and we're all dying and we're all poor, then I don't need to be rebuking you for how you're using your finances all the time. I need to be giving you hope and encouragement. If everybody's wealthy, doing great, not spending their money in the right ways, maybe they need some rebukes, right? So you got to find out. Somehow you've got to wound the comfortable, right? Cut the comfortable, hurt them in some way. And the uncomfortable, the ones that are already hurting, you need to give hope. That's hard in any kind of sermon. So give your pastor, your preacher, a lot of grace. He's trying to deal, or she is trying to deal with 10, 20, 100, 1,000 people. And they have to give a word for both of them.
I heard it.
Who they are at that time.
I heard it said the good preacher can comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable.
Perfect. That's exactly right.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Daniel, was it written in that time period, 7 or
no?
What did some say as early as 150 BC? Like redacted?
Yeah.
Like 150. There it is. Is that Bill who's talking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I asked because I had taken a class years ago, and the guy said it was written during the exile, right, in that time. And he said some people try to keep pushing it, so it's not really as prophetic, whatever, making, but whatever.
Yeah, so this is a great point to make, and I was going to make it a little bit later when I try and get you to name all the prophets.
Oh, sorry.
Which I'm going to do. So I'm sure some of you are quickly going back into your Bible right now and trying to remember the names of all the prophets. But Daniel is one of these guys that is very difficult. And if you're an evangelical, you have been trained exactly the way Bill has said that, the same thing I was, to make sure that Daniel is placed here somewhere. Because Daniel has so many specific prophecies about things that we think are either right now or more likely start right about here and go to here. Okay. So we want to make sure that Daniel fits in here so that he's predicting, prognosticating the future. And if we have him here, then he's not prognosticating, he's actually kind of looking and he's seeing what's happening. Right? So it's not prediction. What I'm trying to get all of us to understand is prophets aren't predicting the future. That's not their main role. That does happen. I don't mean for a moment to say that God never gives somebody something that's about to happen. I'm saying the main role of prophets is not that. Okay. For in today's world, I would say the charismatic movement, right? Can God, for me, being a very conservative, non-charismatic, can God use the gift of tongues, the gift of prophecy, the gift of however charismatics understand that? I would say, of course he can. He absolutely can. He can do whatever the heck he wants, and sometimes he does, and it's beautiful. But I don't think that's the main thing that charismatics, for instance, should be known for, right? There's more to it than just a few gifts of the Spirit that are out there. There's a whole other world that they live in. Charismatic means something very different. So prophets mean something very different. Okay, so Daniel is not, this might be interesting. We should say this right now. Daniel is not even a prophet, in the sense that the book of Daniel is not counted among the Nevi'im. Okay, so in our evangelical circles, we have 4 different sections, right? We have the Pentateuch, we have the history, we have the poetry, and we have prophets. Okay, and in the prophets, we have 12, they're called the Book of the 12, right? Haggai, Amos, Zechariah, Zephaniah, Malachi, remember all those guys that nobody knows what they're actually doing? Jonah, all of those. And we have the 3, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel. And in evangelical circles, we just scratch this off and we say 4. We call them the major prophets. And Daniel is included among the major prophets. But he's not part of the major prophets because
There's no prophecy.
there's no, well, there are some prophecies, I think. But why would they have not included him among the prophet as a major prophet?
He doesn't carry a message
Even
from God to God's people.
He doesn't what?
He doesn't carry a message from God to God's people.
Okay, yeah, that might be. I think you're probably on a track that I'm not going on, but actually it's probably pretty darn good. But I'm going to veer off of it because it's not where I'm already headed. So I'm just asking, why is it not included among the major prophets? Why should Daniel not be among the major prophets? Because when evangelicals talk about the major prophets, what they mean is importance. Okay, they mean these are the important ones. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel are the important ones because they're all talking about this, right? That section of time. They're all like, by his stripes we are healed. That kind of conversation that's going on.
But the Israelites just cared about how long they were.
That's right.
Jace, so what you're saying is even the good conservative evangelicals bring their own theology to the text and then make the Bible do what they want it to.
Yeah, even them.
I was
Yep.
just making sure that was clear because they always say they don't do that.
No, we all do it. It's impossible not to do it. Right? We all bring our stuff in. Even the progressives and the liberals do it.
Oh, they do it a lot too, very much so, yeah.
So it's not about importance, it's about length. So Daniel's not included here because it's short. It's short like all the other 13, the other 12.
So size does matter.
So size does matter. Good job, Travis. Size doesn't indeed
Hey,
matter.
Jace, in the apocrypha, one of the books is the ending to Daniel, right? Does that like increase am I wrong? Is that the Bell and the Dragon? Is that the ending of Daniel?
Yep, there are two parts of the apocrypha that deal with the book of Daniel. that are endings or set inside here, the Book of Susanna and Bell and the Dragon. So read them. They're exciting, super fun, interesting. You should pull them in, but they're late texts,
Right.
as is Daniel. So Daniel in this place doesn't fit. But this is not the way that the Jews organized their canon. Remember, they organized it by Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, the prophets, which includes this and this, the former prophets and the latter prophets, Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim, which are the writings. And Daniel is included in the writings.
Now, do you think any of these prophets that are dealing with this time period were influenced by, say, the Persian Empire or?
Well, absolutely. I mean, especially if we're talking about the book of Daniel,
Right.
right? Esther would have been very, very influenced by the Persian Empire. I mean, that's not a prophet. That's part of the Ketuvim as well. But yeah, Persia is, remember, that's our next major thing, right? This guy here is a Medo-Persian.
So going, yeah, again, Cyrus. So going back to what Josh was saying, how we take the Bible and we try and make it do certain things. I think maybe the prophets didn't take the Bible, but they took the scriptures when they were, whoever was redacting them, or, you know, whoever we want to attribute this book to, they were definitely taking certain things from the past and bringing it into the future with a spin, so to speak, for their current culture.
Yep.
I guess because you're a scholar and you've done a lot of work in this area, like how do we even get into looking into this information? Like, what do we have, like how do we prove that is basically my question, or how do you even get to that conclusion?
How do we prove that they are taking information from the past and bringing it into the future?
No, how do we prove that they're using or influenced by their culture? Besides what we have already in the Bible, what other? I'm sorry, I don't want to take us on a rabbit trail.
Well, no, I'm just trying to figure out how to answer. What
are you looking? What if you want to go and research that? Like, where do you even begin? Like, what do you?
You're asking for other books that talk about this particular subject.
Yes, and then where do you even go? You have to talk to an archaeologist, or I mean, how do you go into that realm? Like,
An archaeologist probably wouldn't be super helpful in this area. You'd need a historian.
Okay.
Who would know what they're talking about in the area of this time period. So, especially this time period here. I said earlier, the book, My Servant, the Prophets, but really any scholarly book, if you get it from an academic press on prophecy, is going to talk about this stuff. There's nothing that I'm saying here that's weird. It's only weird to a few people in evangelical subculture, that grew up in the same kind of fundamentalism that probably a lot of us grew up in.
So which one's the best time period?
The one that we're living in now. It's the one that God has given us.
The ones you gave us. I'm just kidding. It was just a joke.
I don't have an answer. Well, that is a really messy board, isn't it? There's no way that anybody would know anything.
What's the most prophetic period? Like, what's the
All of these are prophetic periods, right? Every one of
the
these.
best one. Yeah, I'm just kidding, dude.
Everything is about pointing to this, right? Remember we talked about this. Christotelic. Okay. The goal of all of this is to lead us to this. That doesn't mean that everybody is making a prediction about Jesus, but it does mean that the history is ramping up to end in Jesus, or maybe not to end, but to climax, to culminate in Jesus. That's what we're looking for, is the cross. So they all are heading in that direction. So that's why I call it Christotelic. And we did a whole thing on that, right? So every one of these sections, Moses, David, Jeroboam, Rehoboam, etc., Elijah, Elisha, it's all in this area. And then our other people like the restoration prophets, Haggai, Malachi. That's what I can think of right off the top of my head, Haggai and Malachi, right? They're in this particular section. And it's really informal at that point. Okay, there's very few left. That's Haggai, Malachi, Zechariah. Okay, I think those are our restoration prophets. That's when things are going back And the prophets are going to come and say, okay, things aren't as good as they can be, but they're coming. The kingdom's coming. It's going to be great. And we read one of the Haggai prophecies, right? Zerubbabel is going to be the governor, or Zerubbabel is the governor, but he's going to be the signet ring. But it didn't come true, kind of. But it kind of came true.
So
That's
you're
what it
saying that
always did, kind of.
these prophecies, these prophetic authors are not thinking of the coming of Christ per se. They're speaking about something that's happening in their time, in their context, but it is all leading up to Christ.
Yes, although, yes, so they are looking at something in their context. That's what they're referring to. But all of the prophets are looking for the Genesis 3:15 prophecy to come true, right? Genesis 3:15, we call it proto-evangelium, the first gospel, that one day someone will come to crush the head of the serpent. So they're all waiting for that. And there'll be a lot of serpent crushers throughout time. Okay? But we're waiting for one to completely end that and move us into a new age, a new world. So that person is going to be the king. That's what they're looking for. Do they know that this is going to be God incarnate? I don't think so. Right? There's a lot that they're missing. And that's why it's so surprising when Jesus comes and he says certain things and they're just like, this is not what we were expecting. So, but that is like even Isaiah, by his stripes they were healed. Even that whole thing about, going to the cross, the servant being crushed, all that stuff. It's not talking about a crucifixion so much. It's talking about Israel. But we can't do all of that unless we start going through the book of Isaiah. That would be fun. We could go through Isaiah. Ooh, maybe we'll do Isaiah instead of Revelation. I think I actually know more about Isaiah than Revelation. Okay, so we've got the time, we've got the title, and we've got the troubling text. So we've got a bunch of our T's taken care of. I'm going to do one more in here, and then we're going to stop because I've got 15. So we'll stop at that point, and then we'll do the rest later. Okay, so let's talk about the task of the prophets. We won't talk about the triumph of the prophets or what's next after that. That'll be a discussion that's for next week. Okay, so the task. On your notes, I think the first thing it says is their task is multifaceted. Okay, and then I've got this web of a whole bunch of things that are happening here. So one of their jobs is to warn. One of their jobs is to encourage. You tell me, what are their different jobs? What are they going to be? Like, they're going to talk about dreams. They're going to talk about what?
Devotion.
Devotion. Excellent. Yep.
They remind people of the covenant.
Covenants. Yep. Huge. Okay. Anything else that they do?
Maybe some insights.
Insights. They're going to represent God to the people, people to God. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Hold this one apart. We're going to talk about this one in great detail.
They rebuke.
They rebuke. Excellent. Okay. All right. So, and they do lots. So my point is that they don't have one job. Their job isn't simply to come and encourage people, or simply one come and say, here are the dreams that I have. Okay. They have lots of different things that they do, and all of these things connect to one another. Right? Sometimes their insights are to represent people in a certain way and talk about the covenant. Right? Everything is all connected. It's this multifaceted thing. So most prophets live on the margins. Okay, except for that little part of the formal prophets in between there, right, during the monarchy. Okay, those people might have lived in the palace and stuff, but most prophets are chosen, called ones, seers, watchmen, observers on the margins. They're on the outside and they come in and they jump in and they say something and then they jump back out. So you get these weirdos. Truly. I mean, if you read through some of the prophets and what they do, they are some strange cats. I mean, these are not people that are normal. And they would be out in the wilderness a lot. So Ezekiel, yeah, exactly. Right? Ezekiel would be one of these guys. Remember some of the strange things that Ezekiel did? Like he shaved half of his beard Remember this? He laid on one side for what, like a month or something, I think, just on one side, and then he flipped over and laid on the other side. Who does this? Isaiah goes around naked for his prophecy. Ezekiel, yeah, you like that one? Ezekiel like burns up, creates a model city and then burns it, I think. And then I think even throws the hair on. I mean, there's some.
Who made their food with fecal matter?
Yeah, that would be Ezekiel as well.
That's Ezekiel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's disgusting.
And well, Jeremiah is, yeah, is it Jeremiah? Because that happens in Lamentations too, and Jeremiah is the author of Lamentations. So yeah, I might even have that wrong, but exactly. Those are the kinds of things that we're talking about, right?
John the Baptist was crazy out in the river, you know.
John the Baptist? Yeah, right. So that's more of a modern prophet, right? That's way over here. That's right at the time of Jesus. And that's the kind of people they do. Eat locusts and wild honey, right? They're wearing sackcloth. So you know when they're wearing these burlap bags, you know, like, okay, weirdo prophet might have something to say. Okay, we want to listen to these guys. So the wilderness idea already is pulling us in that direction. So when Jesus comes, by the way, remember, he's in the wilderness. Spends a lot of time in the wilderness. And even the Pharisees and Sadducees will come out and they'll listen to this weirdo in the wilderness because they know that's sometimes the way God speaks. Right? And then Jesus starts talking about this revolution that's coming. And they're like, ooh, I wonder if this is the guy. Maybe he's more than a prophet. Maybe he's a prophet and a king.
So I should be wary if Todd starts offering me like locusts and honey.
You should be wary if anybody offering you locust tea. Yeah. Although remember, these might not be the little bugs and the honey might not be. You got to do some translation work on that, but whatever. Just like when, you know, the milk and honey, the land of milk and honey is probably not like milk from cows. It's probably syrup and anyway. So just do your own translation work later on. All right, so we've got a lot of weird people that are resistance leaders. Leaders in the worst, in the most minimal sense of the word. That is, they come in, they jump into a king, and they resist them. There's a disruption, and so they don't like them. Kings don't like the prophets because they're telling them things they don't want to hear. So they have them killed, or they throw them into pits, wells, like Jeremiah. Jeremiah's kind of the weeping prophet because he had to keep going and saying things that nobody wanted to hear. No wonder pastors, preachers sometimes consider themselves to be prophets, right? Because they have to say things that might get them fired. And they've got kids that are in college and they want to make sure they do those things, but they've got to be bold.
I consider you and Rob a
How
prophet.
bold should you be and still have a hearing? Right?
Jace, I literally just called you a prophet. I was talking to Chris here, and I said I consider you and Rob more so in the rebuking area than. But anyways, I just called you a prophet today, so just to let you know, I consider you a prophet.
I will take that. Thank you. In the sense that we're talking here, that sometimes people need rebukes, sometimes they need encouragement, right? So it's a prophetic task. I would call all of you to be prophets. It's not just the preaching task that, you know, somebody who formally stands up and does that, but all of us are called to rebuke some people at certain times.
Todd Smith and Josh Patterson are definitely prophets.
Okay. And the rest of you, all 15 people here and however many are on Facebook right now, right? We're all prophets. We're all called to do this task. And so this task is encouragements, you know, calling for sacrifices, dreams, examples, insights, visions, devotions, etc. All these things, but it's standing in between God and man. So I don't think that preachers should be called out specifically as prophets as if they're exceptional. What they are is formal prophets, right? They've been called and paid. Here's your salary. We're going to give you $500,000. You know that we make that kind of money, right? $500,000 to preach every Sunday. And that's all you have to do. Just once a week, do a little job for 40 minutes. And we'll give you that kind of, that's a formal prophet. So I know you guys want to try this now. That's what we get. So remember this. Their main job is to stand in between the suzerain and the vassal. Here we have the prophet. And their job is to take what the vassal says and bring it to the suzerain. And take what the suzerain says and bring it to the vassal. Remember
Is it
those words from your politics and history classes? Suzerain just means the conquering king, the big king. That's him. The vassal is the one who has to pay taxes to the big king. He's a king as well. Okay, so the job of the formal prophet, or for any of us, the informal prophet, is to stand between these two groups of people. Whether we want to call this a king, or whether you want to say it's the people, it's the king who represents the people. It depends on what your context is, right? This might be in your workplace, it might be in your neighborhood, it might be just in your church, whatever it is. Your job is to stand in between these two. Hear what God is saying and tell other people what they need to hear. Right? Maybe they need to hear God's not angry with you. He loves you. Remember, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. Some of you, 14, 15 people here, some of you need to hear God's not angry with you because you sit with this constant total depravity. I'm miserable, I'm a wretch, I'm a worm. And that's okay that you realize you're a sinner, but you need to hear the other side of that. Right? Some of you think you are God's gift to everything, and you need to hear, hey, God's got some expectations of you, right? So this is what we do. We stand in between these two things. A prophet in history stands in between this king with Deuteronomy 17 in his back pocket. Okay, how many minutes do I have? Right, am I out of time pretty much, Travis? I have 3 minutes left.
2.5
Okay.
minutes.
This is where we'll start next week. Okay, because I want to read Deuteronomy 17. I want to think about it. But the main thing I want to get to is trying to explain how this is not about prediction, but it's about foretelling this information. I want to show you how all these prophecies in the Old Testament don't come true and why that's okay. Why it's a good thing that the prophecies that are ushered in by God's own prophets don't come true the way God said for them to say. God says, I want you to tell them this, and it doesn't happen, and it's a good thing. Which should frighten you as you think about it, if you haven't thought about it before. That it's a good thing that the prophets were wrong. Okay, kind of wrong. That's what I want to do next week. They're not really wrong, it's just our thinking that's wrong. But we'll get to that. All right, since we've got 2 minutes left, what do you got?
Just a quick question about the Daniel thing real quick. Would I be correct in assuming that Daniel wasn't written by Daniel? It was written about Daniel.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yep. In fact, I probably argue that none of the prophetic books are probably, or at least a good portion of the prophetic books are not written by the prophets of which they're having a conversation about.
Okay.
Like Jonah, for instance, pretty obviously isn't written by Jonah. It's a story about Jonah.
Right.
Right, from a later time, once we already know what's happened. So a lot of these are probably schools of prophets that would come later on and would write about people that they may have been mentored by, or who knows.
Would a good indication, Jace, be like someone being spoken about in third person? Like this is what that's probably a good indication that it's not that person writing. And I feel like when I read the Pentateuch, and it's supposed to be attributed to Moses, that I see that a lot. And I'm thinking, I don't know, are there still people who believe that, and actually I'm asking a rhetorical question, but that people actually still believe that Moses wrote all 5 books of the Torah. And I don't know if, anyways, what do you think about that?
I think that's off topic, but since we're pretty much at that spot, I'm trying to say that the authorship of Scripture is not nearly as certain as we like to think it is.
Well, he's a prophet, right? It's not that off topic. I mean,
You're right.
Moses is known as a prophet, and then Jesus, when you were doing the suzerain to the vassal, immediately I thought of us being the a chosen race of royal priesthood. So no longer do we need this, high priest to go into the Holy of Holies. We have Jesus, and so therefore, even though we have pastors, like the other question comes to mind is, do we need pastors to enter into this presence? And that's, I have an answer to that, but I want to ask that. I think we do.
We don't.
Travis, I knew it, dude. All right. I think people are gifted in certain areas and that there's leaders. And I think that naturally civilizations and humanity has this component to it that has, like, Jace is leading this class. I mean, you can't get away from it. I don't think. I mean, you could try, but people crave and they need. So, like, for example, apprenticeships, they have a journeyman teach them, and so or somebody who's experienced coming alongside someone who's not and teaching them. So I think even though we don't have to have pastors per se to come into this presence, I think they're important. Leaders are important, I should say.
So the question is, need for what? Like, not to come into Christ's presence. I don't have any kind of special way that I come into God's presence that's different than yours. So I think Travis is right. Of course we don't need it, but I think you're right, Josh. Of course we need experts in areas. Like, I mean, if people think that they can read scripture without experts, you're missing the boat. You absolutely need experts, because none of you read Hebrew or Greek. So as simple as that, you need experts. Somebody had to translate this for you. So yeah, I mean, you're both absolutely correct. You need leaders. You need people who can, who live this all the time and are trying to live it, who can be good mentors and good models. Paul says, follow me as I follow Christ. So, but we don't, you can call me to pray for you, but it doesn't do some kind of special stuff because I happen to be a pastor. Like, I don't have some kind of special access to God that no one else has. Right? You should be calling each other to pray for you too. Yeah. All right, we're out of time. I'm guessing, as always, most of your questions are going to come after the time, because that's when you feel like you can get away with asking those questions. So I'll stick around for a few minutes, but it's already been a long day. Some of you will stick around for longer. So hit that record button, sir.